This is the third item in a pressure pot Thompson valve 2 repair. This is what we call a pileup valve. It's pneumatic. It has an exhaust port and 2 ports on the top. So basically it's what we call a one-way valve. One way because why? The piston comes across, lets the air go down through the port and come out the bottom. Where does that go to? Goes the auto air valve. So this tells the whole blast pot system what to do, believe it or not. A little thing like that. So it's important we keep this one clean, because on the top of him, what you'll have is, you'll have the pressure in, you'll have a muffler, and you'll have the return line from your dead man, which is the green line, the small line. As you can see, it's only a small fitting. So when do I need to repair or do anything to this? Consequently, this is a wear item. It's a slow wear item, but it is a wear item. Say for example I pulled the dead man on and it didn't stop. That's not a good outcome, is it? I pulled the dead man on, and when I released the dead man, it didn't stop blasting. What can happen is that this valve here can get stuck in actuation. The only reason I've found that these stick in actuation is because on a pressurised pot, when you finish for the day, you need to turn the air off to the pot, and the pot doesn't depressurise back through all this valving. So the only time I found that these get jammed is because the air to the pot hasn't been turned off prior to turning the compressor off, the supply air, and the pot's depressurised back through this valve. So the grit that's in the blast pot has actually come back through the standpipe and down through this valving. Is it possible? Absolutely, it happens. And that's in your startup and shutdown procedure that you'll find that you need to ensure that you put all these appropriate checklists in place. Check, have I closed the ball valve to the supply air to this pot prior to finishing with the day? Because when you want to fill this blast pot, these pressurised pots, you have to exhaust them on the exhaust port. So you turn the main air off to the pot, open the exhaust valve, and it exhausts the air from the pot. So what I'm talking about is when you finish for the day and you don't turn the ball valve off to the supply air and you don't exhaust the pot has to depressurise or get rid of the air somehow. So it'll find the easiest route, which is back through the standpipe where the pop-up valve is, because remember the pop-up valve is still sitting in place, it's still actuated. And then the grit and the air will come back through the standpipe and back through all this valving to find the easiest way out. So that can cause this to jam, because abrasives, it's not designed to have abrasive in it. All it is a plastic or nylon piston with O-rings on it, that's all it is. So what I'm going to show you now is how to check the actuation and the repair of this particular unit. Some of them come with screws in them, some of them have Allen caps in them, which you need an Allen key for. And there's two different types. There's a standard pneumatic valve, and there's a pneumatic valve which is operated by electrics. The pneumatic valve that's operated by electrics has got one extra hole in the end of the valve body. So it's important that if you have an electric system with an electric solenoid on the end of it, you order the appropriate part to suit that solenoid. So if you ring the help desk for BlastOne, they'll be able to sort that out for you, because all you have to say to them is, I have a pneumatic system or I have an electric dead man system. And that's all incorporated within this pileup valve. So the pileup valve, like I said, tells the rest of the pot what to do. And that's fundamentally from the actuation of your dead man. So this valve, what are we looking for? Well, I'll quickly show you. Now, if you're out on site, you can use a pair of Stilsons to do this, to hold it exactly the same as to simulate a vise. The important thing to remember is that some of these will be tight. So if they are extremely tight, what I suggest you do is, with a nice new screwdriver, you can actually put a spanner on the slotted section of the screwdriver, hold the top of the screwdriver and just ease it undone, making sure that you don't tear the face out of the slot. You can do it that way if they're a little bit tight. Because if you go to a big screwdriver and think, oh, I'll fix that, I'll put a big screwdriver in it, they don't go all the way home in the slot, and you can actually tear the face off the screw and not get them undone. So there's a tool for every job, and a job that requires a certain tool. What you've got in here is a nylon piston, as I mentioned, with O-rings on it, but also too there is one little tricky bit for young players. And that tricky bit is what you're about to see now. Now look at the end of the body chasing the screws. What does that tell me? That tells me that ultimately in there is a spring. So very carefully unscrew it and look at that. There's the spring. So there's the hole for the return line on your green Deadman twin line. There's a spring, and there is the piston itself. So as I mentioned, there's a little hole there. Does it have any consequence to this one? Absolutely none whatsoever. But that little hole is for the electric Deadman, because the end of this is slightly different and plumbed differently to accommodate a solenoid. So there is a difference. Now, there's the piston. Well, how do I get that out? I bash it on the bench. You could undermine the surface of that. And you can see there's only an O-ring to seal that. So all that air is harnessed by that O-ring. Because remember, if you've got your Deadman's return line screwed in there, all this here is a little exhaust port. That there is the return line signal for your Deadman. So, how do I get that out? Should I put a screwdriver in there and flick it out? You'll damage it and damage the barrel. Now, the imperative aspect here is that barrel, because the tiny little O-rings have to run on that barrel, and if you scour it, you'll get bypass. So instead of, when you operate the Deadman, the piston moving back and forth, it'll blow by the O-ring and the piston will get stuck. So I don't suggest you shove anything in there. What I'd suggest you do is turn this over. Now the spring's safely out of the way and I can't lose it. Undo the screws on this end. Now there's no spring on this end. So should I go any further? Hang on. What if I haven't got a diagram to put it back together? Gee, which way did that go? I'll tell you what I'll do. Before I do that, let's be smart about this. And let's put a mark here to indicate that that was the spring end, like so. There we go. Now I know it goes that way. So I know that that end now is the spring end. And look at this. There's a recess there for the spring to fit in. So I know how that goes back together. So before you start pulling stuff apart, be aware of the fact I have to put it back together, and if the spare bit's left over, it's not a good look. So on this end, I can proceed to remove the end cap so that I can get access to the piston. So these little screws, put them all in a row so that you can put them back together without losing any of them, because they are small. And you can see that they're quite easy to come undone. Don't put Loctite on any of these screws. There's no need. There's no washers on them, as you can see. Again, there's no need, and there's a reason for that. It's because in behind here, there's another O-ring and two tiny little O-rings here. So the reason you don't use spring washers or anything on those screws is because when you screw that down nice and tight, that O-ring acts as a gasket and gives a retentive pushback on the screws, because when it's new there is some form of retention or configuration of the O-ring itself, so it's bigger in stature. It hasn't been utilised, so it hasn't been squashed. So there you go, you've got 1, 2, 3 little O-rings. So sit that face up. Don't put it face down in case you contaminate them. And also too, they may fall out. If those little fellas fall out into the dirt here, the chances of me finding pretty remote. So if I'm on site, put a piece of rag down and you can see them all there. So look at this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 3 O-rings. What's the difference in the 2 end caps? One's got a recess for the spring, one does not. So that there is just a port. That's an airport, not for planes, but for the air to travel from the return signal of your green dead man twin line. Now, here's the piston. How do I get that out of there? Use something blunt, not sharp. Put your hand behind it and slide it out. There he is. 1, 2, 3, 4 O-rings. So they sit down in a ring gland in the plastic or nylon. If you've had grit go back through that by being basically lazy and not turning the air off before leaving site and not decompressing the pot, grit does this. Those little marks you can see there are actually scours. So that's where fine dust or abrasive has been in this chamber, and as the piston's working back and forth, it's chewed into this particular piston. Not only has it scoured that, but it would have had a scouring effect inside this tiny little cylinder. Now I don't know whether you can see it or not, but there's the scour marks inside the cylinder, right there. So that's the marrying side. There's the scour marks. Now, hello, is that BlastOne? Can I have another pilot valve, please? There's not much I can do with it because ultimately that'll end up having blow-by. What's the consequence? The consequence is I can operate the dead man and it doesn't turn off. Not a good look. So, but I'm on site. I don't get a replacement until tomorrow. What would I do? Don't touch the scouring in there, because if you try and shove a bit of wet and dry in there on a screwdriver, it's difficult. You can attempt it. What I'm inclined to do is, this is the only part on a blast pot that I use Vaseline. It's the only part. I can use graphite dust on it, don't get me wrong. But graphite dust is not going to have any residual effect in sealing those O-rings.